Hey everybody, welcome to Tarot Off the Cuff. It's April Fool's Day, and literally this evening I realized, you know what, that needs to kind of be maybe the unofficial or maybe even official. Who makes it official? Who would even do that? Tarot holiday, right? It's the Fool's Day. And that's the card that sort of starts it all. So I put out the message to a bunch of the readers on the team to say, are you free right now to to do like an hour's worth of a talk? How off the cuff is that? 40 minutes. So let's keep our eye on the clock, and we'll at 40 minutes, if we're at a good place to wrap up, we'll wrap up that way. Yeah, so we'll talk about what the Fool is to each of us, what it does, and then maybe ask a few questions and draw a card. Sound good?
Sounds good. And I was the Fool who was available and had the hat and showed up. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm Janis Garan. Great to see you, Kevin. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I don't even think I said my name, Kevin Quigley. That is how off the cuff we are. And I love that I've got a whole bunch of readers that I can just sort of send a message to, and I always find somebody. Like, this is the third time I've done this particular thing, and it's always been super quick. Like, are you free right now? Can we do it? I do hope to actually maybe work some planning into this so that we can make this a regular feature. And there's lots of people that are signing on for that. So that I think will happen. All right, so tarot readers talk about the Fool in lots of different ways. There are probably as many Fool interpretations that that there are as many tarot readers, although they all have things in common, of course. You want to start?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, you know what I did in preparation for this when I found out what was going on, besides find this hat, which I happen to have? I went to a couple decks and got out the Fool card because, as you know, I'm a little bit of a tarot collector and love many, many decks. And the more decks and the more cards I look at, the more I get a well-rounded picture of what each card means. So I would love to start with the baseball tarot. That's okay with you. So by the way, I'm not a sports person, but here we have the baseball tarot Fool called the Rookie. He's wearing the number 0, which is the number of the Fool, right? And I love this because it's a clean slate. It's a blank slate. I mean, this guy has history. He wouldn't have made it to where he is if he didn't, but he's starting his statistics from 0. So it's his first at bat. And I just love that idea of a blank slate, new start. And I also feel the pressure of the rookie right there.
Yeah, I was just going to say he's taking a big risk in a way, like stepping out in a public space on a new team. Yeah, that's not a small gesture. I kind of like the choice.
Thank you. I like it. I like it as well. By the way, baseball tarot, I don't know if you have special decks for special like topics. Anytime I'm bored during a sporting event, I will use, so like the Super Bowl, I'm watching the Super Bowl for the commercials. I'm one of those people. I will pull out the baseball tarot to tell me who is going to win. And sure enough, one year I can't even remember who was playing, so forgive me, but at the very end it was neck and neck, and the tarot, the one team was winning by a lot. The baseball tarot told me the other team was going to win, and sure enough, in the end they pulled it out, and I thought, oh my God, this stuff works. This is amazing.
However, don't use the tarot to make your choices for wagers.
No, I would not.
Bad idea. I actually mean that. Like, I have found, I can't say I've done any research, but like in insubstantial ways, it seems like, at least into my experience, when we start asking the tarot about questions for pure personal gain, it just breaks on me. Like, it just breaks. All right, so did you have another card to pull out?
Well, I have 3 total. Is there any you'd like to share?
Well, the deck that I chose, I mean, I've got tarot decks sitting all around my desk, but the deck that I chose was the Light Seers tarot. This one that's relatively new to me. And the Fool in this one, I love. I really love. Let me angle that towards the light a bit. So it's a non-traditional card for sure. I would likely say that this is a female gendered fool. A lot of times we refer to the fool as an androgyne, which I love that aspect. Although it doesn't really bother me if I see a fool that is clearly gendered that way, but I love the aspect that the fool is in a in a weird way the representation of everybody. Um, And in this case, the fool is on the edge of the cliff and even sort of tipping over, like they're certainly off their center of gravity and heading over the that edge. There's no way somebody could sustain that level of balance, right? So they're in motion. Um, there's a heavy, large crystal in one hand, and then the walking stick is up, but it's not actually being used as a walking stick. And the end on the end that's on the sort of the edge of the card, we can't necessarily see. It's disappearing into darkness. So the bindle is also missing. Um, that sense of preparation, perhaps that smallest bit of preparation that the fool engages in of packing a little bag of something, right? Not here. So I think that's also an interesting thing. So the sense of the word that comes to mind for me with this card is surrender. Um, like this looks like a voluntary jump off the edge, right? Uh, you have a thing.
Well, you know what that first of all, 2 things. You introduced me to this deck in our last combo tarot off the cuff, and, this is now my workhorse deck. This is what I use every day at work. Thank you, Kevin,
Yeah,
because it represents the people I read for. I read for a diverse population. Love the deck. They can see themselves in it. That card, the Fool card in that deck, it looks like a trust fall to me. Like she knows she's gonna be okay.
yeah. And as I was pulling this card out, I picked up the whole deck. So I searched through the deck and I found the fool, right? So we could talk about it. And then I picked up the whole deck to set it down so it was closer to where I would need it to be when we're recording. And one card stayed on the table, and the card that stayed on the table was the world, which I thought was amazing, right? So we've got the beginning of everything and then the end of everything, unless you're one of those crazy 22 people, which we might have in our little recording right now. I am not the 22 person. Full for me is a zero. Uh, but the zero that circles and encompasses the entire deck. So I don't actually put it as, I don't often refer to the fool as the start, even though I think I do feel that way. But in this deck, it's so interesting that these could be the same figure, right? And it came to mind because you mentioned that trust fall idea, right? So in the first image, she's falling off the edge of the cliff, and then in this, and she's falling into this flower of life or seed of life image of the connected circles, and it's exactly what's going on, what we've got here in the world, and that it's caught her. So
Wow.
Chris Ann, creator of this deck, kudos to you for, like, that's pretty direct symbolism there across cards, of course, right? But um, the richness of the ideas and the images and the symbols here are great. And that piece of the fool for me is this idea that one can choose to move through a dangerous world without worrying about it.
Wow.
Do you believe that the universe will come to you and catch you and hold you up? And I think in general, if your answer to that question is yes, miracles happen and you get caught and you get held and protected. And if your answer to that question is no, sometimes you get caught and held and sometimes you don't. Um, so that's a bit of my approach to the fool for me. I'm also, my sort of spiritual awakening um, was very much, and I think this is also true for you, was had much to do with the I Ching. And the I Ching approaches or angles that I was most directed to were Taoist as opposed to Buddhist. Although you know, Buddhism is great as well, but the Taoism practical stuff I love. And I also often, especially in classes when I'm teaching through the major arcana, I refer to the fool directly as the Tao. that's what the Fool is, of this
Wow.
approach of being able to step into the world and trust, just trust in the way of things. Um, oh, I fell off the cliff into a big pit of brambles, and that's exactly what I needed to experience, no matter how hard it was, because I gained the strength or the wisdom that I needed to make a better choice the next time through, right? Uh, so that for me is the quality of the Fool, is the piece of us that is filled with trust and is just ready to go.
Like lack of fear in a
Yeah.
way, or unknowing, like a toddler who's running, just wants to run, and the parents are like, don't run in the street.
Yes. Yeah. I produce a show called Fearless, which I invite performers of different acts to come together to present different pieces, theater, music, dance, whatever, that address the issue of the kinds of fears that we carry with us in our daily life. And the whole, and that's going to come around. I'm doing a virtual one finally, and I'm gathering artists now. That's even maybe why it came up. But the entire production, which has been going, we did do 3 or 4 performances a year, and we've been doing it for, I want to say, 6 years at this point. Um, is about the energy of the Fool coming through, right? That's how we run it. I work on no budget, and somehow I am able to ask the best artists in my area and in the few states around me to jump in. They travel for miles and get nothing other than the experience of doing good work for good people and seeing other artists come together to do good work for good people. So yeah, lots of I love the Fool is in my life in very real ways all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very satisfying, actually. You mentioned the Fool being 0 or 22. It does have a 0 on it, so I do believe it's the 0 card. At the same time, when I calculated my birth cards, the book that I had at the time, which was so far back in the day, there were like 2 books in existence, Mary Greer and Rachel Pollack. And so my birth cards, the way I calculate them, are the 22, which would be the Fool, because we know there are only 21 cards in the major arcana. Well, 22 if you count the Fool. Anyway, and the Emperor. So the Fool and the Emperor, those are my birth cards. And I kind of I relate to those. I think those are a hard birth card combo to have, kind of a challenging one. Yeah. Do you know your birth cards?
I am 21.
You're the
So
world.
here I am as the world, and on my side we've got a Fool, which I think is really, how cool is that, right? And those are the cards that showed up for me right now as jumpers. And Mary, I'm talking to you directly right now. I'll send you a link to this because I'd love to hear about your system that way. I started with Angelus Arian's book that talks about birth cards and soul cards, and I don't know who did this first. I don't know where it came from. So I'd be curious about that. Obviously, you don't have to write a book, but well, you're gonna write a book. That's what you do, right? But I'm curious about that. Did you see Angelus's system, and then did that inspire you? Did you both come up with the idea at the same time and independently, or maybe not at the same time, but independently, and write about it? That fascinates me. Those kinds of things.
I cannot speak for Mary. Uh, Tarot Constellations, great book. I think it's out of print, but there's a new version out there, and she describes her story about how she came to
Oh,
it.
good. All right.
Got to check into that. So does that mean you're the world and
The Empress.
yeah, yeah. Okay. I can see that. Yeah, for sure. In a good way.
I love those numbers. I'm very partial. In another system, I turn out to be the Hanged Man and the Empress,
Hmm.
which I also, that does resonate with me as a certain kind of a truth. But the World card, in terms of it just sort of coming right along with the challenges I've experienced in this life, as well as like my own little list of superpowers that I've developed, just reads so real. It's so real for me. Yeah. And I'll say to Angelus, who's no longer with us, but Mary and the other people that do tarot numerological work. If you're interested in that, check it out because it's kind of cool. Because when I first came across the idea, I scoffed. I thought, really? You're just taking some numbers and then an arbitrary chosen calendar and applying the two things together. This doesn't have any real anything, right? That was my first reaction. And then
Oh, you foolish man.
yeah, totally. But I was wise enough by that point that I realized if I had such an antipathetic reaction, I better look at it. So I really started to study it. And then what I did is I went through my cards for each year going backwards. I must have been in my late 20s at this point, like 28, 29. And then I went through my journals, which went back. I started journaling heavily, I guess, when I was 19. Um, and oh my gosh, did they line up?
Oh,
Every single card described every single year. Um, which fascinated me. So I let go of my scoff and my cynicism and signed on completely. If I ever have enough time in my life to finish my book, it will be about tarot numerology and how it relates to birthdays and birth years. And somebody else may get to that book before I do. That's fine too. But it's great. It's a fascinating subject to me. I really like it. And is it useful? Yes, super useful. Um, yeah. Okay. Any other things to just sort of say about the Fool in general? Yeah. I mean, we could do a whole hour just on this, right?
yes.
Yeah.
So a couple more fools. I have this one. Which deck is it from? It's from a Marseille based
More of a
deck.
Marseille. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the reasons I pulled this one because it's completely different than the rookie, and it's different than the Rider Waite version as well, Rider Waite Smith. Um, I thought this one is interesting because we have an animal, because in the Rider Waite Smith deck, we have that white dog, right? Here, I think this is a cat, or I don't know, maybe it's a dog. It's hard for me to tell. Anyway, that animal is, not doing something nice, I think. Rip the guy's pants or something.
Yeah.
So this, what do you think of this fool? He looks more like the jester, to me.
Could
Speaking.
be. Yeah. And beset. He's beset, right? So there's this, correct me if anybody knows, and I get this word incorrect, but came in a Kabbalah class many years ago. I came across a word, a Hebrew word called klipos. That's how I'm remembering it. I might be wrong. So if I am, please give me some information. I'd love to fix that. But the teacher was a pretty modern guy, but he defined this word as the speed bumps that one experiences when one travels through life with a lack of caution. Um, so there's an aspect of the Fool that I adore, and I know not all tarot readers incorporate this in the way they interpret the Fool, but this idea of stepping out into the world without being worried, with this lack of fear, invites calamity. But it's purposeful calamity. It's the rough thing that happens that you need to experience in order to grow, right? Especially if you do a linear thing from through the major arcana up to the world card at the end. The power that's in that world card is born from doing the hard work of bumbling your way.
One thing that this reminds me of, well, I mean, he's wearing bells on his collar. This reminds me of like the jester card, the one who appears to be foolish, but the one who can speak the truth to the king in jest, right? And say the truth when nobody else can. I find that aspect of the fool interesting. So is he foolish, or is he, foolish crazy? Is he crazy like a fox type?
Yeah,
So
I love that. And that's actually, even as you mentioned it, I haven't even thought of this before, but I use that. I model that when I read for people, especially when the readings get hard. If I'm sensing that somebody is wrestling with, or they're on the edge of accepting a truth about themselves that they may have resisted in the past, um, that immediately lets me see it as cute or funny in a way, like, oh, this is the thing that you do, let's admit this one, but not hold it against ourselves, right? It's just there. Let's and it brings you something. So if you can get someone to a place where they can accept, oh god, yeah, I guess I do participate in this relationship in that way, and that doesn't serve me and it doesn't necessarily serve anyone, but you can then get them to a point where they can accept that, then they can also discover it as lovely.
And maybe not take it so seriously, because
Yeah,
honestly, as the back to the birth cards, Emperor Fool, I liked, I mean, here I am in a jester's hat, right? But I like to appear, I want people to think well of me. I like to do good work. I want to be considered serious. I'm not very good like making fun of myself. I mean, I like wearing costumes, so that's okay. But I don't want to appear foolish to people. So I think that's a challenge sometimes with the Fool. Are we being foolish? Are we being lighthearted? Are we being, is this a new start? Like, what's going on here? So I like what you were saying about pointing something out in a different way, but it doesn't have to be bad. It's not like, oh, you do this thing and that's a bad thing. It's like, oh my gosh, there I go doing that thing again.
right. And it's a generator of gifts, like when you do that. So at some point in the whole fearless thing, since I was talking about that particular show, we did one, we started putting sub themes in. So at the end of October we do a fear of death, right, every year, except for this last year, of course. And we've done fear of love, we've done fear of freedom, and at one point we did fear of foolishness. We did a whole show where all of the artists brought something in of like, what do you do when you're feeling embarrassed and or ashamed and that sort of thing. That was our sub theme. And I did a piece where I have this like wild, crazy sound effect vocal score that I wrote in the early 90s, and they performed it a lot in New York City and in Pittsburgh, where I came from. And then it sat in a box for 10 years, and I realized, oh, okay, let's bring this out. And I had a bunch of middle schoolers doing this. So it was burps and giggles and like all kinds of sound effects and stuff that way. And all I did was sit at the piano, and people are used to seeing me play the piano and like actually make music, right? But I had people sitting behind the scrim behind me that couldn't be seen, and they handed me hats, and I just changed hats constantly for 3 minutes. Um, I had it had to be more than 300 hats that we went through. It was like every second to 2 seconds, putting a new hat on, taking it off, someone would grab it and hand me a new one. And it went seamlessly. I never missed a change and whatnot, but I had this great jester's cap in there, and I don't know, I mean, I had to borrow hats to make this happen. So whoever gave me that one, it went away, but I miss it. I miss my jester's cap from that show.
I have to get a new one. Speaking of hat change, I might as well do that. I do have another hat here. It's my fool's cap that I made.
That's
The
lovely.
Rider Waite Smith little, yeah, fool's cap.
That's the classy fool, the classy version of the fool.
Classic, yeah. Uh, which kind of brings me to like the last card that I pulled out of all my millions of decks over here. From the Gaian Tarot, the Fool as like the seeker, starting out on a new journey and a new path. I think this whole deck is just so lovely, and I know you use it as well, Kevin. Um, Here we have, so we were talking about whether this is a cat or a dog. I don't know. We know in the Rider Waite Smith version, it's a white dog. And here we have a fox. How do you see the animal on that card? What do you think?
Well, I definitely see a fox, right? I mean,
Well, of course.
Joanna's artistry is amazing, right? So her species work, her herb work, um, and her human beings are, and most of her human beings are people she knows that are in her life, which I love that too. You can feel that she loves her models, right? And that's not true of every tarot deck that's out there, right? But of this one, it certainly is. But the fox is the trickster of the canine group, right? It's a trickster spirit. It's interesting that it's such a placid image where the fox definitely feels like it is a companion animal, However, right,
Mhm.
um,
Looks like he's waiting for her. He's like saying, "Come on, let's go."
there's a piece of that fox that makes me think it's not 100% the benevolent friend, and there may be a little bit of the Klipos in there that like, oh yeah, oh why did I just trip and fall? And the fox is giggling in the corner, knowing it didn't point out the rock that you just were about to step on, and that kind of thing. Yeah, so there's this. I definitely have relationships with my spirit guides where they put sticks and boulders into my paths for me all the time, and I'm not. I'll be honest that I'm not always able to rise to the point where I say, "Thank you for this particular obstruction." Right? Sometimes I can get there, but I think that's a part of the fool's experience is pain and failure is a part of life. If we return to the Buddhist idea, is one of the first teachings: life is pain. But you can say that if you say that while you're giggling about it, becomes a whole different statement, right?
That's true. I have a really good friend who's always just saying like, "Life, man." Like you just don't know what's coming out. It's life, man. When you can't explain it any other way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same idea.
Yeah, I had so I teach middle school kids, and I one of the things that I do with them very specifically is I try to set up relatively safe spaces that have manageable levels of risk. And I was watching one of the kids climb up onto a tree branch that a low pine tree branch, 30-foot long branch, standing on the end and holding another branch that was at about shoulder level, and just springing up and down and bouncing on this. Not a little kid, this was a middle schooler, so he was taking risks. And I let the other kids that were doing other things get some space, and I went very close so that I was nearby because I could sense that something was going to happen. This was the day before. No, this was yesterday. This wasn't even the day before. This was literally yesterday. And then there was a certain point where something distracted him, something some other kids were doing at a distance, right? So that little dog coming up, biting him on the butt. Uh, and his feet didn't slip, but his one of his arms slipped, and a part of the branch put a scrape down the inside of his arm. Like it was a it was a really intense scrape, right? And he jumped off and yelped in pain, and did a pain dance jumping around for a while and whatnot. Really, really tough kid. I said, here's what I need you to do right away if you can handle this. And if you're in too much pain, then I'll take another approach. I let him know that, right? Um, so he was able to listen. I said, just go into the boys' bathroom, get some really cold water on it, not hot water, and some soap. Make sure it's clean. That's going to hurt. But then also cool it down, and that will calm it down. And he came back outside 5 minutes later. And was doing fine. And I took a look at it and made sure, yeah, you got this really clean and all of that. There was no way to bandage this thing. It was 10 inches long. It was from elbow to shoulder.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I said, oftentimes these things develop slowly, so you need to keep looking at it, because you're probably going to have some blood show up to the skin and all of that. So really pay attention to it. If it becomes a big problem and you're still in class with me, let me know. Or if it's another teacher, I'll let the other teachers know that this happened, right? And then by the end of that particular recess, I came in to check on him again, like the 10th time in 20 minutes, and he was sitting there sort of squeezing his own arm to make it bleed, right? Um, which was fascinating. And I said, if it starts to bleed a lot, that needs to stop, right? We don't want drops of blood falling, but it was just these little tiny beads in the brush burn. Um, but that was really a fool moment, right? He knew he was taking a risk. He took it anyway. He fell. He scraped himself. He paid for it in pain, right? But then it became like a thing for him to learn about his own body. And I saw him today. I was teaching earlier today, and I checked in with him, and he showed me with pride these two welts, red welts going down the inside of his arm. No pain at all, but like this idea of like, yes, I did that, which is also like a fool's response to injury, right? Yeah. So I love that.
Avatar.
Yeah.
You know what? That actually reminds me of, as you're telling that story, I'm thinking of tarot students who in classes, you learn something. It is a leap of faith to learn the tarot. Some people jump right in like it's nothing. I felt a very big responsibility around it when I learned it. I feel a big responsibility when I teach it, but people will, try it, mess up, like your kid getting the scrape. Sometimes they don't want to come back again. I mean, or don't think they can come back from it. Oh no, I made a fool of myself. I said something stupid. I don't know what I'm talking about, but you have to get back in there
Yeah.
again. And then at some point, just like you said, Kevin, they will then come back with, oh, I had this reading and here's what happened. And it's like battle scars. Like I had this difficult reading, but I got through it. I did it and I learned something from it. So I guess it applies to both climbing trees and studying and teaching tarot.
How great is that? That's like it's almost like we wrote this. There's a segue right there. So
Did not write this.
so here's my thought. Let's ask a question and then we'll each draw a card and see what that responds. And here's the question that just jumped into my mind, just from the stories in the conversation is, how might we as tarot readers invoke the Fool for us as a tool, as a powerful tool that we can use? So I've already put my World card and my Fool back into the deck and shuffled things up. Do you have a shuffled deck on hand?
I do. Do you want to go first?
I don't know who's should be drawn. Yeah. Is your deck jumping to spit something out?
No, I'll have you go first. How about that?
Okay. All right. So I'm taking the top card off for how can we invoke the Fool to make us better readers? How can we put that into our tool belt, right? And I get the Three of Cups.
Aw, I love it. How are you interpreting that?
Yeah. So the Three of Cups for me, I want to stop looking at the card and let's look at the camera. In this context is celebrate everything.
Oh,
There are, I have another colleague as a teacher, since that's in my mind. She came up with the most brilliant phrase and response to deal with complaint or reluctance in a student. She's the movement teacher, right? So she has kids dancing and playing sports and doing all sorts of stuff, and they love her class in general. But every once in a while, she come up with an activity, and she uses this with the little ones, first, second, and third grade, because I asked her about it after I observed her use it. And one kid on one particular day didn't want to do a particular activity, and it was vital. And sometimes with those grades, you'll just let the kid do his own thing for a little bit, and then they'll wrap themselves back into the class in a moment. That's okay for first, second graders. But in this case, she did need everybody. They might have been playing with a parachute, one of those things where they're sending it up into the air and going underneath and all of that. And her response was, oh, this is, you don't want to be doing this right now. And they were like, no. And she says, that's all right, but you get to do it anyway. And the return of her positivity, rather than having the adult get triggered into a negative response, like you have to do this, but you get to do it anyway, so stymied this child that they jumped in because there was some sort of a fear that was causing them to not make the leap, right? They wanted to see what was happening and figure it out, but she needed hands to stabilize this big piece of cloth. That she just jumped in and realized she was having fun immediately. And that to me is a very Three of Cups kind of approach to the attitude of the Fool, of this idea of like, yeah, yeah, I get it. Like maybe you're not super enthusiastic about it, but you could choose to be enthusiastic about it and just do it. And then discover that it's all okay. It really is okay. This one wasn't such a big deal.
boy, I need to keep that in mind as an adult. I have a whole list of things I'm putting off.
Oh boy. Yeah. Now, okay. Now I just get to start applying that to my own life, right? Yeah.
Exactly. No, I love that. You'll have to tell her that you passed that on.
I'll send her the link. I'm sure she'll watch this because she actually is also, she's one of my few colleagues that reads. Um,
Nice.
yeah.
Awesome. All right. So my deck, I'm using the Hanson Roberts deck. Just thought I'd pull out a Rider-Waite type deck. So how do we best, as readers, as teachers, as tarot students, how do we best embody the Fool? Is that our question?
Good enough for me.
At random. Okay, what the? Oh yeah, okay. So it's not the Emperor, it's the King of Swords, and he was reversed.
Mm,
He is almost the antithesis of the Fool, perhaps. He's the overthinker. The Fool's just jumping in. So you cannot overthink this. How do you embody the Fool? I feel like this is saying, put your brain on the back burner, turn it off, turn it down. The inner critic, the critical self, has no place around the Fool. Those energies don't go together. So, wow. For those of us who have a very developed like inner critic,
uh-huh.
I feel, by the way, I feel like we cannot get rid of that part of us. At least that's been my experience. So even if I get the opportunity to do something foolish anyway, there's always going to be that critical part of myself. Oh no, I look stupid. I'm going to mess this up. I think most humans have that. Uh, that part needs to come with you. I find you can turn that volume down, but you can't get rid of it really completely unless maybe you're just having so much fun that you forget to be self-critical. And so I feel like maybe to look, yeah, turn down the volume on the critic, turn up the happiness and joyfulness potentially of the Fool, and kind of jump right in.
I love it. Yeah. I often, one of the, I like doing grids of the court cards, comparing them to different things, characters in fiction or occupations. So, and my occupational grid, the one that always comes up for me for the King of Swords is the surgeon.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
I I honestly get that card a lot in people's health area if they're going to either they've had surgery, need surgery, or are going to undergo surgery. That
yeah,
is a surgeon for
yeah.
sure.
And then, and so the way you're talking about that for me makes me feel, and the surgeons are notoriously egomaniac, often jerks. Like, I've got a few friends that are nurses, surgical nurses, and they will talk for hours. Like I've had to interrupt them more than once to sort of say, can we change the topic? Just talking about their horror stories about the way surgeons have treated them.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, like in my brain, I'm seeing the two Fool cards, the one from the Gaian and the one from the Light Seers, are both female, right? And then we
Cool.
have this surgeon turned upside down of like, let that aggressive dickhead part of you go to sleep for a bit, because it's certainly, that's a useful quality, right? You need to be prepared, you need to be an expert, you need to know what you're doing. Like all of those things are highly valuable, but do they come automatically attached with a sense of criticism and judgment and lack of kindness or understanding of how other people's are feeling and stuff? I would say yes. I would also be happy with any other reader that would say, well, maybe not, maybe they don't, I don't know. um, but it feels that way to me, as like that kindness is super important. And in fact, my card with the Three of Cups is three women like hanging out. And
Yeah,
so
friend.
yeah, so there's an aspect of femininity that's coming out with the Fool that is feeling very true to me right now, at the very least. Yeah. Cool. You have another question that's bubbling up in your head?
No, I don't. Uh, I see when, yeah, don't I feel like a fool when I get put on the spot? I don't know. You know what? How about this? How about when we do feel like fear about taking that first step, taking that leap, beginning that journey that is the journey of the Fool? I mean, I don't know if this is a message from you, a message from me. How can we best start that journey?
I love it.
All right. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, why don't you draw first?
All right, so this is a message. You know what? I'm kind of old, but I know a lot of readers nowadays, a message for the collective. So, how can we best start a journey that we might be a little trepidatious of starting? And the card I'm getting at random. Oh, no, no. No, I'm not even kidding you.
I- That's one of the funniest things I think I've ever seen. I'm so glad that you
Oh,
went
no, so okay, I'm not even kidding you.
for it.
This came up at random, but right side up. So, you know what? If we have an idea, if we have a fully formed idea and we want to do it, but we're feeling trepidatious, honestly, this is when you need the gumption, the steeliness that this guy provides. So we slammed him, and I guess the universe wants us to talk about maybe the good qualities of the King
Or
of Swords.
maybe the fool wants us to talk about the good quality. You're like, hey, don't be so judgmental about that king that's judgmental.
Thank you, cool. No, but it's true because just and I don't know any surgeons, but we need surgeons. We need people who aren't afraid to be like, I can fix this, and I am not afraid to dive into somebody's beating heart. Um, when more lesser people, lesser foolish people would be like, I'm not going in there. I'm not being that responsible. This takes a level of bravery, I think. So have a plan, develop a plan, but ultimately you just have to jump in there.
Do it.
And
That makes me think of the one surgeon I do know. Here's a quick story. I'm full of these things. Is I work with, oftentimes I love working with what I would refer to as a mixed cast. So like a show where there's lots of singing, and we've got local amateur singers that want to come in and get on a stage and learn music and do that, and then I mix them in with professionals, with ringers that we hire, and that's a hard thing to do. But if you choose the right professionals that are open-hearted and kind and whatnot, and not judgmental, yeah, um, it can be a beautiful learning experience for everyone. So he's a teaching surgeon at the nearby medical center here, and stepped in to sing with his son in this show. Right. So really open-hearted guy. We became friends almost immediately. Really like this guy. And while teaching complex music, choral music, multi-parts and stuff like that to amateurs, I've got lots of tricks and tips. And right. So and one of them is um, don't sing quietly while you're learning a piece. Make big, honking, loud, hideous mistakes. No one in this room is going to criticize you, and you will never hear me speak negatively to somebody that's learning a piece by taking a chance. You enter early, you sing a wrong note, yay. That's my philosophy that way. Because in particular, you'll know, oh, that was wrong. I entered early, right? Or I held my note too long, or that wasn't the right pitch. And the next time we do it, your body by itself is going to choose a new time to enter, or it's going to choose a new note. The new thing may also be wrong. um, Possible, right? But it's not going to be the mistake you made last time. And the chances that you're going to be right go way up faster than you think. Whereas if you stay quiet, your body isn't helping you learn, right? Because it can't feel the note you just sung. So years later, I bumped into him somewhere in a social context, and he grabbed my elbow and he says, "You know what? I need to thank you. We haven't talked in a long time, but I was doing rounds and I thought of you just this month, earlier this month, where I had a group of sort of early interns, earlier medical students, and boy, are they nervous, right? And we literally go into rooms with patients who have agreed like to have me come in with 5 interns, right? And we look at your chart, we ask about your symptoms, we'll talk to you, and then I'm going to ask them to diagnose. So they don't get to see the part of your chart that has an actual doctor's, licensed doctor's feelings, and they just have symptoms, right? And then he said I was having real trouble with this group because nobody would volunteer a diagnosis. They would just say quiet, and I had to call on people by name, and then they felt that the spotlight was on them, and it just made the learning situation really hard and uncomfortable for them. So I gave him a speech this particular morning, and I said, you're not being graded if you make a mistake or a wrong diagnosis in these conversations. There is zero repercussions, right? So take a chance. Just take a chance. And if you're wrong, we'll talk about why. And if you're wrong, but you've made a really interesting choice, we'll talk about that too. Um, and they started to do it, and they were wrong over and over and over again. But by the end of the day, with that session, he said, um, I sat down and we talked, and we said, oh, you know what? This particular condition that this patient had is commonly misdiagnosed as this. And that's the mistake that was made, but it happens all the time. And we wouldn't have talked about that unless somebody had taken the chance to do that, right? And then he named 5 or 6 other ways that somebody just taking a chance at diagnosing something, getting it wrong, actually helped the class learn. Then he said to me, he was like, I took that directly from you telling me to sing wrong stuff, to take the chance. And that, I mean, that made me feel great. But that to me is what this card sort of is about. Like, you have to have that steel in your spine, like you said, to be able to have the courage to take the risk, to take the
Yeah,
chance. Yeah.
that's
Oh,
wonderful.
and how funny is that, that card shows up? So I left my 3 of Cups sitting here, so I'm not going to draw that, but I
You will not
love
get
that
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 card
happened.
again.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that fills me with such joy. Ooh, interesting. This is the darkest card in this deck. It's the one card in the whole deck that when I got it and was taking a tour of it, was like, oh, that might be so dark that I don't want to read it. So
I
here we
bet
go.
I can guess, but go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. So this is the 3 of Swords.
Man,
There we go. That's not
that
reflected.
that artwork for to me is really, I mean, it's so evocative, but it's so much.
Yeah, the pain in her expression and the blood that's dripping and the rents. Oh my gosh, these look like the scratches on my student, right? I love how things tie together that way, right?
Well, I was talking about a heart surgeon, I think, and having the guts to dive in there.
Oh, right. Yeah. So, okay. So here's this like massive amount of what do we need to do to get moving, to take that initial risk? Like the Fool does this easily. And in this case, um, I'm interpreting that as we need to actually take the risk that this might suck. There might be pain. You might get it wrong. You might be moving too quickly, or you might not have the skills that you need, like right, those kinds of things. But I do subscribe to the philosophy that the big leaps in our lives, when we make large movement or large growth or learn really valuable lessons, we never feel ready for those. Um, and we often regret them because of the the repercussions, or the pain that we experience. But alongside this, is, I think I would even go so far as to say, this is a necessary inclusion in that idea of, um, when you discover yourself regretting a particular choice, that is one of those moments where you really would have do good if you availed yourself, give yourself the time to sort of meditate on it and reflect on it once the initial pain is past, to ask the situation as though it were an entity, the question, what did you give me? What was the gift in that situation? And you're always going to find it. You will always find it if you ask that question sincerely. And then you'll realize, oh, it was actually worth it. I don't regret. Boy, was it uncomfortable. Like, it didn't feel good. But I wouldn't change my response. Like, I actually value where I am now and who I am now because I went through that.
I'd have to agree on that, especially in readings. I mean, I would personally, I would love to just grow from wonderful and happy events, but I think the times that I've grown most as a human, and honestly as a psychic reader, um, has been through difficult readings, difficult relationships. I've learned the most from. So maybe that's part of the human condition.
Right. That thing that, like, if everything goes great, you don't really grow. Like,
Or you
um,
take it for granted, perhaps.
Yeah, true. Yeah. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. Like, is pain a necessary part of growth?
I don't want to think so, but it does kind of rear its ugly head often.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, it doesn't have to be something you have to seek ever. Um, but when it happens, uh, if if you can start to train yourself now to become immediately and actively grateful for the horrible moments. I have another teacher friend teaches at another school, and she brought this thing up this was many years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, not a decade, but um, and she said one of her colleagues brought into a faculty meeting this idea while they were planning for the school year in the summer of um, vociferous, exultant expressions of gratitude every single time something horrible happened.
Whoa.
Yes. And I was like, describe this, please. Right. So she says, I don't have, see if I can get a little further away from my camera. She says that we agreed as a faculty and have been doing this, that every time something happens that would normally make us go, "Ah," right? You shrink in and you tighten up, to do the opposite gesture and shout, yay, right? Throw your hands into the air and like cheer or, say thank you. Every single time. And she says it has not only changed my personal experience of calamity, it's brought us closer together just because of the act that you'll hear that from another teacher in another classroom down the hall. And you'll know that, oh, something just happened, right? And that she's handling it, but that the next time you walk in and you see that teacher, you can say, hey, what happened? Right. And then you can share and support each other. But you're supporting each other because you're laughing about it rather than even like just being compassionate. I love that. I don't do that. I should, but I love that.
To do that I think collectively, we all need to do that for 2020.
Yeah, to get through that last horrible year. And even like right now, the COVID's still here, right? And the big stories now, my state just got to a point where they opened up vaccination possibilities for all teachers. Some states
Oh,
aren't doing that at all. Other states did it before we did. I live in Vermont. So we made sure that first responders and medical personnel and by age, everybody was being taken care of. But teachers kind of got left out of the equation there, and they fixed that. So I'm 51, and the current vaccination age is 55 for my state. So anyone that's 55 and over can make a vaccination appointment, and any teachers can now jump in. And I'm one of the older teachers at my school. So I went and got my first dose, and all the other teachers are going, and many of us are getting hit with side effects pretty hard, right? So there's boy, that would be useful. I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to start talking to the other teachers about it. Like, celebrate the fact that like you've got a thing that's literally designed to make you stronger, to improve your immune system, but you've got to go through the brambles. You've got to go through the pain before you're on the other side. So this is a perfect example of, can you be grateful for the difficult experience while you're having it?
and it's a pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again moment.
That little pestery dog biting at your butt. Uh,
Right.
cool. Okay, so we're at about time. We're what, 50 minutes somewhere in there. I'm not even sure, but it's somewhere about that. So we could probably wrap things up. Is there any closing things that we want to mention about April Fool's Day?
Happy April Fool's Day. And no, I can't think of anything. Nobody play a trick on me. I hate tricks. That's what I would like to say to the audience.
That makes me want to FedEx something to you like right now. I
Next time, I will be quiet.
I love April Fool's Day as a teacher, a middle school teacher in particular, because um, every single year I at least come across one student, usually sixth graders, I'm not sure why that is, think about it, that have thought for weeks about what the trick is they're going to do, right? And they're genius. Like, they're so good at coming up with that little bit of silliness. So tomorrow I'm going to go in to teach, and we'll see. I'll get to see what happens. Okay, cool. I'm Kevin Quigley with Tarot Off the Cuff, and I've been talking with
Janis Garan with Tarot Off the Cuff.
Happy April Fool's Day, and we'll see you next week with another 10-minute talk. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thanks, Kevin.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, thanks for watching. This is Kevin Quigley with Tarot Off the Cuff. If you can take a second, click the subscribe button down below. That'll let you know when a new video is posted and you might want to jump over and watch it. If you hit the thumbs up for the videos that you really like, that will help spread the word so new people will find Tarot Off the Cuff in their feed, and that helps the channel grow. That would be great. And if you got a question or a comment, positive or negative, whether you agree or disagree, or if you want to add information or your own take on a particular card or a particular topic, put a comment down below. We would love to hear from you. Thanks so much.